We need to send more judges to the border to process these BS asylum claims on site and on the spot. 9 out of 10 don't qualify for asylum, so turn them around and send them right on back, because I guarantee you they'll stop trying to come here under false pretenses if they know they're going to get turned around the moment they fraudulently step foot on our soil. Next, reinstate Remain in Mexico, another great way to de-incentivize people with BS phony-ass asylum claims from making the journey. That'd also make Mexican officials rise to the occasion and step up to the plate. Guess what? Mexican citizens don't want their cities and streets burdened with migrants either, but right now they just send them right on through, so we have to deal with it. So cut off that luxury and Mexico will play ball. Threaten tariffs like Trump did, and they'll play the flippin' World Series of ball, believe me. But the Democrats don't want to fix this because they designed it. They want to pump illegals into this country, give their corporate donors a massive low-wage workforce, use their beloved mail-in voting system to get illegals in on the action, and bolster census numbers and Democrat strongholds so as to add more Democrat seats to Congress. This is a very thinly veiled plan, and if we don't do everything we can to stop it now, there will be no going back. Because you can change policies, you can repeal legislation, but you cannot undo millions and millions of people living in the shadows, yet in plain sight. Our country is like the Titanic. Once the leaks fill the boat, it sinks, so start patching.
Just like that, the second hour is here. OutKick 360 continues from Music City and across the OutKick network.
First hour flew by.
That's right. That's right.
It's a good sign.
Chad, your quick thoughts on this?
Yes.
So this is par for the course. So Tennessee finishes behind Alabama.
Yeah.
In the final AP ranking.
Of course they did.
Butch Jones and Greg Schiano put Alabama at number 5 and Penn State at 6. The lowest Tennessee appeared on the ballot was 8. That was where North Carolina State's Dave Doran and Nevada's Ken Wilson voted the Vols.
So let me go through that list. Ken Wilson we had on the show, right?
Yes.
So I don't know that he sees a lot of Tennessee football. Butch Jones,
Clearly
obviously
not.
an axe to grind and worked at Alabama for a while after being at Tennessee. Dave Doran was about to get the Tennessee job maybe, and then things got weird in the end and did not get the job. So maybe an axe to grind there. I love all the tweets from people that cover Tennessee that said, if only there was a way to settle this debate about Tennessee and Alabama with an on-field performance in a game that we could just say, oh, that's the tiebreaker.
Well, but the other thing, too, is for all of those, it's Tennessee voted below Bama. I don't know why if you're a coach and you're like this, there's no value to the Vols season. I don't know why you're propping up Bama in the same regard, right? Like the stiffest competition.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just you're allowing yourself to buy into the notion that, which is true, Alabama only lost 2 games, both on the road in hostile environments and very close. And Tennessee just played terrible in one game. But I don't understand how the 2 close losses and losing to the team that you're now ranked ahead of is somehow trumps a team that just had one inexplicably bad performance all year. And when you look back at a 27-14 loss at Georgia, doesn't look that bad on a day where Tennessee really just didn't play that well offensively. I mean, Georgia played great. Not taking anything away from them, but looking at that head-to-head now, Georgia clearly the best team in the country. Tennessee missed 2 or 3 deep shots in that game they normally hit. That could be the difference in, I'm not saying they're winning, but that game looks a lot closer if they score 2 more touchdowns on a couple of plays where they had a chance.
Perception for the Kentucky basketball program, not good.
It's at a low right now.
And with more, we're joined by Jack Pilgrim, Kentucky Sports Radio. Jack, what is going on in the Commonwealth that has led to such angst for Calipari's program?
Losing. I think that's something that Kentucky fans have not been used to, and they will not accept. It's something that we saw a 9-16 season 2 years ago. We saw the worst postseason loss in program history the year after that, and then now a season with the reigning National Player of the Year coming back to anchor your offense. You have a Bob Cousy Award finalist leading the way at the point guard position. You have national title expectations, Final Four expectations, and you have whatever they're putting out on the floor right now. 10-6 is just not excusable. They don't look like a competent basketball team. They don't look cohesive. It's leading to about as frustrating atmosphere in Lexington than I can remember personally.
Jack, I almost expect you to open with a sign that said, "Please go to Texas" in front of you. I saw you guys tweeting about that last night with the fan being ejected. It is incredible when you run through the recent history with Kentucky that John Calipari has a job now. When you think about the expectation level at Kentucky, he's really been given a pretty long leash. I know the national championship helps, but, I mean, Jack, you know better than anyone at Kentucky, Final Fours are an expectation. You know, winning a national championship every so often is an expectation with that program, and he's not coming close to that right now.
Yeah, he's built up a lot of equity from the first, 10 years that he was in Lexington. The run that he went on, 4 Final Fours in 5 years to start things up, I think created, like you said, a very long leash that unfortunately is getting shorter and shorter by the years. And, I think they gave him the benefit of the doubt with the COVID year. They gave him, the benefit of the doubt saying that last season, at their best, they looked like a national title contender, and they should have been that throughout the year when they beat Tennessee. Unfortunately, I know you guys favor Tennessee at home. We looked like a team that was unstoppable, and then injuries kind of got in the way, and then, nothing will ever excuse St. Peter's. But there was always kind of a built-in excuse no matter how things unfolded. This year, there's nothing. You have all the pieces. You have, a new coaching staff that Cal likes, and everything. You have the veteran leadership. You have the freshman talent. You have, the length, the defense, the size, all of the stuff that should on paper result in a national title contender, but it's just not coming together the way that everybody's expecting. So I think now is when the impatience is really starting to come to a head, and I think that's where you're getting the Cal to Texas rumors and the signs at Rupp Arena.
Jack Pilgrim with us, covers the Wildcats for Kentucky Sports Radio. Is NIL part of the issue? Starting to hear, some murmurs of not that money's the issue, but allocation of funds to certain players over others. Is there anything going on behind the scenes in that regard?
I don't know if that's necessarily fair to say it's individual things, because they do a lot of team NIL deals to begin with. Oscar Tshiebwe is a very unique case because of the restrictions that he had going into it. And I think a lot of it he deserved back then that I think is kind of a makeup for his inability to get NIL last season. So I don't necessarily see that, but I think it's definitely, more so how they're allocating time and, where the meetings are and the, where the commercial shoots are and showing up maybe a little bit late for practice, things like that. I don't think it's the actual money itself, but more so just the cohesiveness. Instead of going, doing team dinners and having the camaraderie and going out to movies and doing things like that, a lot of it is they're going to do TV shoots and, commercials here and there. So I do think that's been a part of it, but I do think that there's some locker room concerns right now.
Just being there on a daily basis, is Coach Cal deflecting criticism off his team more than he normally would and putting it on himself, or is it about the same?
That's kind of a funny way to put it, because the way he words things a lot of the times is, he says, well, here are all the things my players did wrong. They didn't rebound well here. The defense wasn't good enough here, but don't blame my players. Don't attack my players, attack me. So it's kind of an indirect way of saying, well, I'm kind of attacking my players. And explaining where things went wrong in that regard, but still putting it on himself about where things went wrong. Last night was a big accountability push for him. He said, look, this is not where things need to be. This is not an acceptable loss. Look, South Carolina is a terrible basketball team. There is nothing acceptable about how things unfolded last night. So I at least appreciated that he went out of his way to say, what happened last night cannot happen. We can't be the gold standard of college basketball if you lose those types of games. So it kind of an indirect way. Yes, the accountability is there, but not without some digs leading up to that.
You have a season like this with all this expectation, and you're not delivering on it now. If you're Kentucky, there's plenty of places you can point the finger. On that roster, let's talk about the players, Jack. Who's been most disappointing to you? Because that's the big surprise to me is this would just be a typical year if it was just 5 freshmen starting, and they're going to get better and better as the year goes on. But there's veteran leadership on this team, and they're not playing connected at all with the 2 veterans and the rest of the roster. So who's been the biggest disappointment up to this point on that roster?
Ironically enough, I think it is your National Player of the Year. I think it is Oscar Tshiebwe. This is a kid that, was unbeatable. He was the most dominant presence in college basketball last season. I've never seen anything like it with my own 2 eyes. Shattered every single record that Kentucky basketball had to have, every national basketball record. He shattered. He comes back. And I don't know if this is, when you come back as a National Player of the Year and there are expectations, internally, I need more shots. If I'm going to come back to this program when I could go pro as the National Player of the Year, I need X number of shots or X number of minutes, or, I need to be taking threes instead, expanding my role to look better. Unfortunately, I think that has created a dynamic where everything revolves around him. It is an Oscar-centric offense where the ball has to go inside to him before anything else can happen. There's no ball movement outside of that to lead up to, clean up opportunities for Oscar that made him so dominant last season. It's actually Oscar as kind of, trying to turn him into like a Kofi Coburn style of player. And that's just not who he is. He is not this fundamentally sound, elite footwork, soft touch around the basket guy that you can throw it down low to him and let him just take games over. That's, he dominates the game in other ways by attacking the glass and being that elite cleanup specialist where you can jack up threes on the outside and have him, magnet hands down low for easy putback dunks and layups. That was what made him so special last season. And they've gotten away from that, unfortunately. There's not enough outside shooting. And unfortunately, I think they're not engaged on the perimeter because they know that, you're going to toss it inside to Oscar Tshiebwe and he's going to go to work for 20 seconds. And if you do get the ball back, it's going to be 4 seconds left on the shot clock for a heave, a prayer there at the end.
It's weird to talk about must-wins in January, but we're reaching a critical point right now with Kentucky basketball. You mentioned Tennessee. I think Kentucky's this has got to be sort of not a last stand, but a big stand in this game, and a chance to get an enormous road win over a top 5 team this weekend. I know Rick Barnes talked about it and said, we know we're going to get Kentucky's best in this game. That's the expectation Tennessee is entering that game, that they want this one bad. What do you think about the chances of Kentucky rallying the troops at this point, even at an early stage in conference play, and playing great on the road against what's been a really good Tennessee team?
Sounds great on paper, but nothing about this team indicates that they're anything close to being ready for that competition. They are 1-4 in quality competition games outside of Rupp Arena. And the one win they had was against a mediocre team a Michigan team out in London. Nothing about their team camaraderie, the chemistry, how they, present themselves in, last season is the greatest example. They go to Lawrence to take on Kansas, a top 5 team at the time, and they're laughing at the crowd. They're getting into it, and you could tell they were mentally engaged. They were locked in, ready to beat the heck out of Kansas, and that's exactly what they did. Went out and beat them by 30 on their own home floor. Nothing about this team indicates that they are ready to make that type of statement. I thought kind of the same thing against Alabama. Okay, yeah, you struggled a little bit earlier on the year. You didn't get to make a statement at Gonzaga or in the Champions Classic against Michigan State or in the CBS Sports Classic against UCLA. Those opportunities were there, and then they crumbled. I thought they were going to get that same chance down in Tuscaloosa against Alabama. Absolutely the worst performance we've seen up to that point, and then we get what we saw against South Carolina. So I like your all's optimism and how it sounds on paper, but I can't say that I share the same.
Yeah, look, I don't know what's going to happen. I do just think that this is so big for Kentucky. They've got to play this game with their hair on fire on Saturday because they need it really, really badly right now. Jack Pilgrim, Kentucky Sports Radio, is our guest. I know there's no consolation for Wildcat fans in that state when the team's not doing well, but is there a slight consolation that Louisville is maybe the worst college basketball team in the history of major college basketball this season?
You can't even really enjoy that because Kentucky fans love Kenny Payne. Kenny Payne was Cal's right-hand man forever. So even a guy that Kentucky fans have respected forever. He was great to me when he was here and being on this beat, doing recruiting, things like that. I love him to death. And seeing him struggle in this way, it's not even a consolation prize in that regard. So it's even that is not a great position to be in. There's nothing really to hang on to right now if you're looking to be optimistic. Yeah, there are 8 quad one opportunities to close out the season. It's a tough SEC slate. You can steal a couple if you want to, but as of right now, they're on the outside looking into the NCAA tournament. I think that's all Kentucky fans care about.
Jack, is there still beef between Calipari and Stoops? And what has been the interaction between the two over the last 7+ months since we were discussing this storyline?
So I was actually down in the Bahamas with Cal in that little very select pool of reporters where he brought up the football school versus basketball school. And I talked to Cal after that, and you could tell there was a lot of remorse. Like, dang, I did not mean to word it the way that I did. And if I could get my words back, I would definitely word it a different way. But I think there was almost the way I think he kind of, internally thought it was maybe a little childish on Stoops' side of how he handled it and, bringing things to the media and retweeting things and saying, we haven't lost 4 straight postseason games and things like that. I think he kind of made it into something that it didn't necessarily have to be. And I think every chance that Cal had to apologize the way I think he wanted to initially, I think Stoops kind of took that and Cal said, all right, well, if that's what you want to make it, then that's what it's going to be. So unfortunately, I don't think things are great even still. I think it's gotten a lot better because they have to when you have 2 programs like that, Kentucky football competing a whole hell of a lot better than they did before. You have to have at least some camaraderie in that regard. You can't have 2 programs and coaches fighting against each other. And I thought DeAndre Square, Kentucky's standout linebacker, put it best yesterday during the loss in basketball, said, I think this is all karma for those conversations. Kentucky had an underwhelming season on the football field, and then the basketball season is having the season it is right now. So I think he put it the best, that both programs are suffering the karma from that stupidity.
Yeah, which is the last thing you want is any other athlete in another sport commenting on losses and not really taking glee in it with that tweet. But you know what I mean. You don't want infighting with that. But in facts are facts, Jack. It is a basketball school. John Calipari was speaking truth when he said probably shouldn't have said it, but he's speaking the truth. The pulse of the fan base there. Where's the fan base side when that feud happens? Did they get mad at Mark Stoops and his reaction to it? Were they mad at Calipari? How did the fan base break down with that?
I think they saw it in a sense that, look, Kentucky football is, if you go from where it was 10 years ago to now, they're at least making, right on the cusp of at least making some noise in that SEC East battle. And that's something that, you talk to the coaches on the football side and all they see is Atlanta. They want to get to the SEC championship. That's all they care about. And when you feel internally that close to that mark, and then you have the leader of the other side of the aisle saying, but they'll never be Alabama or Georgia. It does hurt, from a recruiting perspective, because then you do have the Alabamas and Georgias of the world going, look, they don't even have the internal support from the basketball coach. They're poking fun at you. Do you really want to go play for a basketball coach? You want to go play for a basketball school? So I think that was the frustration on the fan side of things, where it's like, look, that comment didn't help anybody at that certain time. I understood what Cal was trying to say, because at that time he was trying to get a multi-million, $100 million practice facility built on campus. And he was saying, if Nick Saban asked for that practice facility on his campus, he'd get it. Why is it that the Kentucky basketball, the equivalent Alabama football, Kentucky basketball, why is it that when we ask for something, we're not getting it? So that was the point. He wasn't even trying to drag football into the UK football program into it, but it ended up being an indirect jab at his own, umbrella of the UK athletics family. So it ended up being bigger than what it needed to. But yeah, I think the frustration was pretty significant on the Kentucky fan side of things.
Jack, I know whenever you joined us, you didn't think we'd bring up the summer storyline, but I just had not heard anything on that in months, and I'm fascinated by it because both are there. They're both struggling, towards the end of the season for Kentucky, and then certainly right now with hoops as well. So it sounds like it's not going away, and now we wait on the next serve, next return serve.
Is Mark Stoops getting what he wanted in NIL? Is that part of it getting done with the Kentucky football team? Because I see some of the defections on the roster, and it makes me think that maybe they're not getting what they need in NIL for the football program. Am I wrong?
So they're doing a fantastic job of collecting the funds necessary to get the Devin Learys of the world, to get the Berrien Browns and Dane Keith, those guys happy. Kentucky's going to get their star talent and the money in their pockets. That is absolutely going to happen. The issue is the funds right now are enough for the top 10, top 15-ish types of talent. But when you have unfortunately, Justin Rogers, who was a former 5-star talent, on paper has not lived up to that. He had a pretty successful season this past year, but he admittedly is not a star. And unfortunately, Deion Walker came in as a fringe 5-star talent, and he did look like the immediate freshman 5-star talent that they thought Justin Rogers was going to be. He's going to get that money. So right now the issue is they have enough up top, but it's the core group where you get from 15 to 40, or the key role players that you need on your roster to keep around to build the depth and build the overall talent. That stuff is not there, but the overall star talent is. So I think they're inching closer, but they're definitely not where it needs to be.
Jack Pilgrim from Kentucky Sports Radio giving us great perspective on the basketball program. Thank you, man. This is great. We appreciate it, and let's catch up soon. Chances are the storyline's not going away anytime soon.
I'm welcome anytime. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, man. There's Jack Pilgrim.
In college basketball, Kentucky's going to be a story, good or bad. I mean, if they go into
Well,
Knoxville and knock off Tennessee this weekend and start a run, that's going to be a story. And if this downward spiral continues, it's an even bigger story, because if this thing goes into February and the writing's on the wall that they're not an NCAA tournament team, then we're going to be talking about John Calipari's next job.
In Austin?
If he's lucky. Again, I'm not hiring John Calipari if I'm Texas. I'm not hiring a failed head coach. It's one thing if they get in the NCAA tournament, turn this around, and he does the Tubby Smith and gets out before he gets fired. It's another thing just say, yeah, we'll take the guy Kentucky just fired. That's had 3.
Yeah, he would need to bounce.
Kentucky had a good season last year in a bad tournament, right?
Yes.
So it was a bad exit, but they did have a good season. The year before was not good, and now this one's not good. That's 2 out of 3 if this continues. I don't know if I'm Texas that I'm hiring that at this point.
Coming up, we've got some updates across the NFL with head coaching opportunities, interviews, including at least 2 for Sean Payton. We'll tell you which 2. And, of course, the Saints are granting permission for Sean Payton to be interviewed. News with Lamar Jackson, news with Tom Brady, and more. Plus, who's going to be calling plays in New England? Someone new. Details next on OutKick 360.
Man, just getting into the craziness. We've got the college football playoff championship game coming up on Monday. But looking back, your opinion, semifinal Saturday was just so wild, and getting to watch these games and coming down to the wire and the back and forth. Let's start off with Michigan TCU. You got Max Duggan and the way that he played, Jim Harbaugh and his squad. It just seemed like they kind of laxed out there in the middle, and TCU took advantage. And what were your takeaways of how TCU is now playing for a national championship?
I was pretty stunned that it happened, and pretty stunned by the way it happened. So I guess going in, if you were to tell me an upset's going to happen, not the craziest thing in the world. I didn't expect it, but it's not a wild concept that a 9-point favorite or underdog can win a game. When you start to see it play out and you realize Michigan has these weapons that have gotten them to where they are, and they are electing not to use those weapons. Inside zone was a figment of your imagination in that game. Just didn't happen. Therefore, using J.J. McCarthy's legs really didn't happen. the way that you had seen it happen earlier in the season, using Donovan Edwards down inside the 5, where they got inside twice and scored 0 points from those trips, didn't happen. So I was sort of incredulous watching how it was unfolding. So here's what's funny. We were at the Peach Bowl, and that game's getting ready to happen, and I was on the field watching warm-ups, and I was standing there talking. Let me whisper. I was standing there talking with Urban Meyer, and he is watching the video board along with a lot of the other Ohio State staffers. Yeah. And so it's kind of always a surreal environment. If you've ever been at that late playoff game, the early game's happening as your game's getting warmed up. And if you're in a stadium that has a big video board, like Mercedes-Benz has that ribbon board, it's on and the players can see it. And certainly the fans are reacting. So when TCU would score, Urban Meyer's just like going crazy, like a pure fanboy, just cheering like openly. And you're seeing some of the players on the field acknowledge it. And you're seeing some of the staffers on the sideline acknowledge it and like cheer. And all the while you're saying, hold on, we got a game that's going to kick off here in an hour. I'm not saying they weren't focused. I'm just saying it was a weird dynamic. But yeah, right. Watching that unfold, and then just you knew what was immediately going to come after that. And that was Michigan lost. Okay, now we start up the Jim Harbaugh NFL rumor train, and that's going on even as we speak. So I was a little dumbfounded, to be honest with you. Not that they lost, but the manner in which they lost.
Is that going to transition? And I know we'll get into Georgia here in just a minute, but we've seen teams in the past where they get all up for one game and they put it all on the line. And then come that second game, and I'm not even just talking about playoffs. I could be talking about regular season as well. Can TCU do that again? Can they have that same type of energy? Can they play that same type of defense, and which was lacking in the third quarter? But I'm saying, can they get up for that type of game one more time?
I don't doubt they'll be up, but there are things that have to happen. You can call it disrespecting TCU if you want to. I fully respect the program, but we got to be real here. We're talking about a 12 or 13-point spread for a reason. There are things Georgia would have to do to assist them. Football happens that way sometimes. It just happened in the Michigan game. Michigan did some things to assist them. Credit TCU for grabbing the game and taking it. If Georgia doesn't do that, no, I don't think any amount of hype or being up will matter, because Georgia's a better team than you. They're that much better than you. If you can start to pull them out into the deeper end of making some mistakes, whether they be self-inflicted or whether you can steal a possession or two, onside kicks, fake punts, etc., all of which I think will have to be pulled out of the bag by TCU in this game.
With us, OutKick 360, 3 to 6 Eastern, each weekday across the OutKick network. Chad, we're on the hoops discussion, so let's work in the AP Top 25 and the rankings right now. And Houston remains number 1, followed by Kansas, Purdue, Alabama, and Tennessee. That's your top 5. Your biggest takeaway from the top 5, and let's work in the top 10 where there's Texas still right there.
I find it amazing that we're having this big discussion, even in a previous segment today, about Tennessee and Alabama for 4 or 5 in football, and they're 4th and 5th in basketball. Impressive year for Alabama and Tennessee athletics for the top 2 money driving sports in college sports, football, men's basketball. My takeaway is this. You look at those top 2 SEC teams. Alabama has a road win at number 1 Houston. Tennessee beat the crap out of Kansas on a neutral court in the championship of a tournament in November. Those are 2 great wins. They still remain great wins. They will be all year for those 2 teams. Other takeaways of teams that I've seen so far this year, UConn is national championship level good and tough. I really like that UConn team. Watching them a couple times this season. Davey, who just inexplicably is a Duke basketball fan and a Tennessee grad, which I'll never fully grasp or understand. He even said this about his Duke Blue Devils, though. They're ranked 24th. If their name wasn't Duke, they wouldn't be in the top 25. I concur. I don't think they're very good from what I've seen. Outside of that, Missouri's a big surprise to be in that top 20. Jamie Dixon has done a great job at TCU to be in the top 20. North Carolina, I believe, ended up knocking off Virginia last night, who's 13th. So that's going to change. Virginia came back and won, so Virginia won it. Never mind. So Virginia, have not seen a lot of them, though, this year.
Chad, is this about where you thought Auburn would be? I took a flyer on them on a preseason, like just the odds. And
I think this is the low end
they should
for what Auburn is going to be this season.
They should be top 15.
I think their
based on where they are right
ceiling
now.
is right around 10.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a year ago, they were ranked number 1 in the country for a time, and they had a top pick on their roster in a one and done. They don't have that level of talent or star power this year with one guy. So where a year ago their ceiling was number 1 in the country, I think this year their ceiling's probably 10. I think their floor is right at the edge of the top 25. So 21's about right.
Yeah.
Probably about the average of those 2 of what I would think Auburn should be at this point. Miami's really good, too. That's a team that I watched a little bit. Arkansas has had some bad injury issues and should be better. I also think that with Eric Musselman, his teams get better over the course of the year. They're going to be fine. They got a big game tonight with Alabama. That's a huge matchup. Alabama and Arkansas tonight in the SEC. That's number 4 versus number 15. But I think Arkansas is going to be a team to watch as we get to March.
Some NFL headlines, and let's start with Tua Tagovailoa, who's been ruled out of this weekend's matchup for Miami against Buffalo. Skylar Thompson scheduled to be the starter for the Miami Dolphins on the road. And I was going through Armando Salguero from OutKick, his post on social, and the injury list for the Miami Dolphins is lengthy. Just a handful of those who are not participating in practice this week for the Dolphins. Teron Armstead, Bradley Chubb, Melvin Ingram, Kendall Lamb, Raheem Mostert, Tua, and Teddy Bridgewater was limited in practice with the knee and then the right finger issue that he has. Others on the injury report, Jalen Phillips, Jalen Waddle, Cedric Wilson, Jeff Wilson, Greg Little, and Skylar Thompson has an ankle issue, but he's a full participant in practice. This is not the way. They're limping in literally to the playoffs, and they're the biggest underdog of the weekend, 13.5 currently, and that really took a huge jump up on the Buffalo side of things in Vegas whenever Tua had not cleared concussion protocol.
It would be one of the most improbable playoff upsets of all time if this Dolphins team.
Well, based on expectation, too.
And
for Buffalo,
yeah,
too.
I mean, it may be the biggest. I mean, we'd have to go back and look at point spreads to see mathematically what the biggest upset would be, but this would be right up there. Given expectation for Buffalo, given the injury situation and playing with a backup quarterback for Miami, it's a bad game.
Yeah.
It's just a bad – let's not talk about that game again.
Well, I mean, let's
move on to
it's
other
relevant,
ones.
though, with the injury report. And also
it's relevant in that Buffalo's going to kill them now. I think they would have won anyway. But this is just not going to be competitive. That Dolphins team that I watched a lot of that game on Sunday with Skylar Thompson, they kick a field goal to go up 9-6, and they win it. They win it 11-6. And I was talking to Tyler, one of our producers, who bet on them covering, and a lot of people won there because that gave them the cover on that last play of the game, safety that Miami got to make it 11-6. It's a team not worth discussing. Now, what is worth discussing is after the season ends on Sunday for Miami is how do we look back on Mike McDaniel's first season? Hutton, you brought this up. The way they went all in around him,
Yes.
and then what happened, I give the guy a pass. I think getting
Yeah,
the playoffs this
I do
year
too.
with Tua in and out and the concussions and everything else, in no way did he do a bad job. I mean, we can sit and nitpick of, well, we made all these investments.
I think
and
he impressed
we should be better than
a lot
this
of naysayers,
seeding, you know,
yes.
as a 7 seed, and we should be better in winning playoff games. Well, that's great, but you don't have a complete roster or anything close to it, and you're
Yeah.
playing with a backup quarterback. So that has to be factored in when you evaluate the job that he's done. I think he's done a good job in year one,
Agreed.
given the circumstances.
Agreed. They need a better run game, run support, but that's the next layer they have to add to this team moving forward.
But you're right in that, you know, the ownership's going to look at it as, look at all the money we spent, and then look at the return on investment. The comeback is, yes, let's go back with a healthy roster next year and see what happens.
Rookie 7th round
Let's
pick.
see. Let's see
with
what
a 7th
happens.
seed.
What you saw early in the year when we've got guys healthy and what we could be. Remember that win over the Dolphins over the Bills early in the year in the heat in South Florida? Let's think about that team before the injuries started happening and see if you can have a little bit better luck with injuries the next year and go into that season and see what you can do.
Well, think about, so we were discussing last week, by the way, Damar Hamlin released from the Buffalo hospital where he was being monitored. He's home. He's headed home, which is great news. 9 days after what happened on Monday Night Football in week 17, or week 17, excuse me. But both of those teams, we're talking about Buffalo and Cincinnati. We were discussing how do you break the tie and how do you determine home field advantage, who gets the number 1 seed. Turns out it's Kansas City, and we know if it's one of those teams involved, it's going to be the AFC Championship at a neutral site. But both teams basically have, based on injury reports for who they're playing, have the best possible scenario considering that they didn't get the bye. Buffalo has Miami, and Cincinnati has, as of right now, the Baltimore Ravens without Lamar Jackson. Again, not ruled out, but not also confirmed to play as of today. Initially, the report was he was going to miss about 3 weeks with this knee issue. It's been 6. And doubling the recovery time in a year where he is trying to win over the idea that he deserves the guaranteed contract, just like we've seen with Deshaun Watson. To me, the only way Lamar Jackson ends up getting that is taking the Baltimore Ravens on a Super Bowl run. That's what it comes down to now based on the time missed and where Baltimore is in the pecking order of the AFC. If he's not playing, huge for Cincinnati. And the fact that we haven't seen him in a while, I mean, there will be some rust with this offense, but it will improve because the offense has not been good with Huntley.
And it's looking like he's not going to play. I mean, what percentage is that he plays in this game? It's
20? I don't know.
It feels like miraculous right now if he plays, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been double the amount of recovery time. So I wonder if there's been a setback, if there's been something else. You know, some players don't feel good on the knee versus, I don't know, but it's a weird dynamic considering what's at stake, and he's likely getting tagged instead of getting the contract extension.
I love Cincinnati. I love their chances of making a run and not just getting to the Super Bowl this year like they did last year, but winning it. And I'll say all those things and say that if Lamar Jackson plays in this game, this is maybe the best and most interesting game of the weekend. And they could lose in round 1 at home.
Well, and their defense, Baltimore's
but it's going to take Lamar Jackson playing.
Yeah, and Baltimore's defense is really good.
Yeah, I just don't think it matters with Huntley at quarterback, though.
No, it hasn't.
I mean, their defense can be great, and Joe Burrow's not going to make the huge mistakes that's going to give them a chance to score on defense, that's what it would take with Huntley at quarterback to pull the upset. But if Lamar Jackson plays this game, absolutely Baltimore could go to Cincinnati and win.
The Ravens, though, surprisingly, you look at their schedule, they won 4 of their final 6 games, which is crazy, considering that Jackson wasn't a part of, 5 of them? The schedule helps them. You know, they were playing Pittsburgh. It was all low scoring. Pittsburgh, Atlanta, and they lost to Cincinnati and Pittsburgh down the final stretch of the season, the final 2 weeks of the season.
Hutton, in 2021, we were in College Station, Texas.
Yes.
Watching Zach Calzada play heroically and lead the Aggies over Alabama in a huge upset. I was on the field when it happened. Fans stormed the field. Amazing moment for Zach Calzada.
You were with?
I was with Billy Lucci,
and
our guy, and John Football, as I like to call him.
Yep.
One Johnny Manziel. Young John Football was alongside. So from that moment, Zach Calzada battled injury. Wasn't great from that point on for Texas A&M.
He was Zach Calzada.
Transfers to Auburn, does not play at Auburn, and from Auburn has gone to, wow, Titans Amy in the house. Look at that. Hello, Amy. Amy Wells. Love to see it. Goes from Auburn to now, it's official. This was reported yesterday by Pete Thamel, but Zach Calzada makes it official. Hutton Zach Calzada went from Texas A&M Aggie starting quarterback, beating Alabama, to playing at Incarnate Word. That is his next destination.
Wow.
That is what we call leveling down.
Well, I mean,
now Incarnate Word puts up a ton of points. Their offense, I just know I've seen crazy scores with them where they've scored 70 and 80 points in some of their games.
A great NIL program there.
I mean, who knows? It's in San Antonio. You're in a major market for Incarnate Word. But, yeah, I just found that fascinating. Sort of the JT Daniels approach. But at least he went from A&M to Auburn, very like programs, and thinking he's got a chance to play at Auburn, doesn't. Now he's at Incarnate Word. This is not to make fun of Zach Calzada.
I mean, he said
because he provided us with a great sports viewing moment. This is just to say that that's where he is right now.
But no one's going to remember Incarnate Word. You remember the night that they took down Alabama. That's the
forever Aggie,
and he's the
Zach Calzada.
Yeah, he's the storyline of that game. Getting the drives in the fourth and then overtime to make it work, or the fourth quarter, excuse me, to make it work.
Now he gets to be the story of Incarnate Word when they upset Stephen F. Austin this year.
Yes.
In another game that will be just as memorable as when A&M beat Alabama at night.
So the New England Patriots. Bill Belichick met with Robert Kraft, Patriots owner.
I call him Bobby Kraft.
Bob Kraft.
He loves it when you call him Bobby.
They have come to the conclusion that there will be a new play caller. There's going to be a new person over offense. I nearly said offensive coordinator. I don't know if Belichick will allow us to call anyone offensive coordinator. They should. This opens the door for Bill O'Brien. Don't you think?
Yes. So Bill O'Brien should have, if Bill O'Brien's not hired as a head coach somewhere, which I think it's weird that he's not getting bigger looks, and maybe he will and get some interviews and end up having a shot somewhere. He was pretty good with the Texans. I mean, we always remember the end. The same goes for Harbaugh. Harbaugh should be right there with Sean Payton as the most sought-after NFL head coach. He was 44-19-1 as an NFL head coach. Everybody should be after him. I kind of feel the same about Bill O'Brien, given his track record and those division titles with the Texans. His problem was he was a terrible general manager. He's a good coach, good offensive coach, terrible GM. So I'd be surprised if he doesn't get a chance at a head coaching position. But if not, New England, right here in Nashville with the Titans, makes a lot of sense. He's going to get a good spot as an offensive coordinator. The whole Alabama thing just feels like, and he said it, is this 2 or 3 years he's been? I think two. It was always kind of a 2-year commitment. I mean, I think he said outright, I want to go there for 2 years and then figure it out what I want to do next.
He's finishing with Bryce Young, right? He's got that done, and now it feels like he's about to jump back to the NFL.
It's almost like a Mormon mission trip. I think Mormons go away for 2 years.
Yeah, recovery.
This was Bill O'Brien's Mormon mission trip to Tuscaloosa to work for Nick Saban for 2 years. I'll give you 2 years, Nick. 2 years is all I'm going to do, and then I'm going to go do another job. But this was his equivalent of that mission trip.
It was a great finish. I don't know how the Patriots ended up going into Week 18 with an opportunity to make the playoffs. Same, by the way, for Pittsburgh, who finishes with a winning record, 9-8, and Tomlin. Were they 2-6, 2-5, and finished 9-8 as a organization. Belichick is exactly 500 since Brady went to Tampa Bay, and the thought is with Mac Jones, you have to bring in an offensive mind instead of Matt Patricia and anything else that they're doing to set him up for the best course to have some success. What they've done was odd. It was confusing. It was, this is Bill Belichick doing that? Really? And there are some candidates out there, Chad, since Josh McDaniels left, that make a lot of sense. O'Brien leads the path for that, and that's the best course for Mac Jones. It has to be.
Absolutely. And just the veteran leadership of Bill O'Brien, who's been with so many different guys over the course of his career and has molded some great quarterbacks, obviously.
Yeah. Tom
Brady being one of them. Here's where Bill Belichick has gone for me from a perception standpoint. I don't care that he's the coach on the other sideline anymore. Never thought I'd say that. This guy had a dynasty with the Patriots. I don't see any coaching advantage when he's going head-to-head with anyone else in the league. And for years, I'd look at it and say, well, watch out for this one because it's Bill Belichick and his game plan against this team. The last time I can think about a game where I left it saying, boy, that's a Bill Belichick game. A year ago, in a horrible wind, rain, cold storm in Buffalo where they don't throw the ball and they win with defense, and Josh Allen looks terrible in awful conditions. And I thought, boy, that's Bill Belichick being Bill Belichick. And Bill Belichick and his defensive game plan won that game. Now I watch Bill Belichick, and I think he's just some old coach on the sideline. There's no advantage. There's no disadvantage either. It's not for me to say that I think that the other team's at some huge advantage against him as a head coach. Hutton, he looks like just another guy.
Well, but it's no coincidence that Tomlin and Belichick got their teams into playoff position. Both had a chance in Week 18, despite slow starts and really poor play. The other coaches are fired after 3 years. These guys they constantly, if they're not winning, they're in contention. And I think they really set themselves up for a sliding down the hill that they're trying to climb whenever they made the decision that they did with the offensive side of the football this past year. So you invest in Mac Jones. They literally stayed put in the draft, and he fell right to them. And you go with defensive and special teams-minded coaches to run that side of the football.
It was a cute move. It was someone who thinks they're the smartest guy in the room. Yeah. And I'm here to tell you, Bill Belichick is a smart football guy. He's won a lot of games. He is no longer the smartest guy in the room, and this season proves it. It was dumb. Everything they did this year was dumb with that whole cutesy.
Yep.
We're not going to have a coordinator. And no, you're not reinventing the wheel. Go hire Bill O'Brien and make this thing. Let's stop this. Let's stop the charade and hire Bill O'Brien.
Later, we'll discuss Tom Brady and the assumption that he's playing another year. But we could also see him play his final game. I don't think that's the case, but it's in the back of my mind as they take on the Cowboys. We will also give you an interesting NIL deal. That's next on OutKick 360.
Visited our southern border for the first time in his career yesterday. But when I say southern border, I mean that very loosely, given he saw and did far less as president of the United States than any one of our Fox News border correspondents see and do on any given day. But how nice of them to clean up the homeless encampments, by the way. Wouldn't want the reality of the situation to aesthetically F up the optics, right? But this whole sham trip is too little, 2 years too late. He should have just met with the cartels and said, you're welcome, since he's funding them and funding them well. Since he took office, over 5 million illegals that we know of have entered our country to live in the shadows and suck it and we the taxpayers dry. This president nor his border czar Kamala give a damn about the invasion, and neither do the so-called Republicans who signed on to that $1.7 trillion omnibus spending bill that funded the invasion, but not the protection of our southern border. And now the Republicans have the House majority. If they allow another penny to go to DHS without a border enforcement mechanism, let God strike their political careers dead on the spot. Securing the border is not that hard, folks. Trump was well on his way to doing just that before Joe came in and undid it all. So let's start out by impeaching Mayorkas, who not only lied about that whole whipping scandal, but has sold Border Patrol agents down the river every single day since he's held that post. This is elementary school stuff. First, we need a physical barrier that keeps these illegals out. Yes, the wall. States should not be forced to use shipping containers to protect our country while the Democrats leave it defenseless and encourage the free-for-all. Then, we need to send more judges to the border to process these BS asylum claims on site and on the spot. 9 out of 10 don't qualify for asylum, so turn them around and send them right on back, because I guarantee you they'll stop trying to come here under false pretenses if they know they're going to get turned around the moment they fraudulently step foot on our soil. Next, reinstate Remain in Mexico, another great way to de-incentivize people with BS phony-ass asylum claims from making the journey. That'd also make Mexican officials rise to the occasion and step up to the plate. Guess what? Mexican citizens don't want their cities and streets burdened with migrants either, but right now they just send them right on through, so we have to deal with it. So cut off that luxury, and Mexico will play ball. Threaten tariffs like Trump did, and they'll play the flippin' World Series of ball, believe me. But the Democrats don't want to fix this because they designed it. They want to pump illegals into this country, give their corporate donors a massive low-wage workforce, use their beloved mail-in voting system to get illegals in on the action, and bolster census numbers and Democrat strongholds so as to add more Democrat seats to Congress. This is a very thinly veiled plan, and if we don't do everything we can to stop it now, there will be no going back. Because you can change policies, you can repeal legislation, but you cannot undo millions and millions of people living in the shadows, yet in plain sight. Our country is like the Titanic. Once the leaks fill the boat, it sinks, so start patching.
Coming up, Carlos Correa actually has a team. believe it or not. That's
So
in 9 minutes. And a really interesting NIL deal. Dearness Collin, the Popeyes meme kid, who, like, if you told me what he looks like now is this kid from, the commercials, no way I would believe you.
I think he looks exactly the same.
You do?
Yes. When I saw the side-by-side, I was like,
it.
He just looks like a bigger version of the kid.
I don't see it. He is getting he's now getting NIL through Popeyes. Freshman offensive lineman, though, at Division II Lake Erie College. 6'1", 330 pounds. No surprise there.
If you are a teammate at Lake Erie College, and I don't know what he's making in NIL, but let's say it's a lot. I hope it is for Dearness' sake.
And good for Popeyes.
Because he's got it's a smart, strategic partnership. I love it. This is what name, image, likeness was created to be, is this with Dearness Collins. It's terrific. It is commerce. It is free markets. It is going out and marketing in a smart way around someone who had an impact on your brand because of a social media viral thing. I love it. But I think the dynamics at Lake Erie College in the locker room of, hey, Dearness, are you buying burgers tonight? Or are you going to take us to Popeyes since you got all this money? I mean, he's got to be the only one at Lake Erie College with any NIL money.
I would think so, yeah.
Right?
For sure.
The rest of the guys are like, I mean, does he get Popeyes chicken for free? It's like a lifetime of chicken.
Like Jalen Hyatt with Hyatt Hotels. Like he gets everyone something.
I mean, it's not going to be good for your arteries, but I think a lifetime supply of Popeyes chicken sounds pretty damn good. You just go whenever you want. Yeah, Dearness is going to have a family one day, and he's going to decide it might be pretty easy for me to go and put some food on the table by cashing in on my lifetime supply of Popeyes chicken.
Where are you on Whataburger versus In-N-Out? Nashville's getting In-N-Out soon.
It's no contest.
I agree with you on
In-N-Out burger is far superior. Whataburger is the most overrated product I've ever had based on the hype. And the hype, to me, hurt my experience with Whataburger.
But you and I had In-N-Out
Whataburger,
first.
to me, is a churched-up Sonic burger.
Yeah, it is.
But I can't really – I mean, Sonic is better than Whataburger. It's not good. It's not bad.
It's the equivalent.
It's a burger. It's a fast food burger. I don't eat it and think, boy, that was really bad, and I don't eat it and think it's special. In-N-Out, and maybe it's because we're on the West Coast or in Phoenix or wherever when we eat it, but when I eat In-N-Out burger, I think this is really good.
Yeah, I agree. When you think of chicken, you go to Popeyes?
Popeyes is good. Growing up in Middle Tennessee, KFC was really the only option.
Yeah.
Mrs. Winters.
Now it's Zaxby's.
Does Mrs. Winters still exist?
Zaxby's, though.
But Zaxby's are tenders. They don't have fried chicken. When I think of fried chicken, I think breast, thigh, leg.
Yeah.
I'm thinking the bucket.
But Zaxby's has really gone on the cheap side of their servings.
Hutton,
they have reduced everything in half.
We could spend an hour on how we pay so much more for food and get so much less. The tender sizes.
Are we better off for that? Not for paying more, but less.
This is not just Zaxby's. If Zaxby's wants to sponsor the show, please do. It's not just you. Everyone's tender size has shrunk 2x over the last year and a half. It's crazy.
Wednesday's headlines next, and then Clay Travis joins us on OutKick 360.
Visited our southern border for the first time in his career yesterday. But when I say southern border, I mean that very loosely, given he saw and did far less as president of the United States than any one of our Fox News border correspondents see and do on any given day. But how nice of them to clean up the homeless encampments, by the way. Wouldn't want the reality of the situation to aesthetically F up the optics, right? But this whole sham trip is too little, 2 years too late. He should have just met with the cartels and said, "You're welcome," since he's funding them and funding them well. Since he took office, over 5 million illegals that we know of have entered our country to live in the shadows and suck it and we the taxpayers dry. This president nor his border czar Kamala give a damn about the invasion, and neither do the so-called Republicans who signed on to that $1.7 trillion omnibus spending bill that funded the invasion, but not the protection of our southern border. And now the Republicans have the House majority. If they allow another penny to go to DHS without a border enforcement mechanism, let God strike their political careers dead on the spot. Securing the border is not that hard, folks. Trump was well on his way to doing just that before Joe came in and undid it all. So let's start out by impeaching Mayorkas, who not only lied about that whole whipping scandal, but has sold Border Patrol agents down the river every single day since he's held that post. This is elementary school stuff. First, we need a physical barrier that keeps these illegals out. Yes, the wall. States should not be forced to use shipping containers to protect our country while the Democrats leave it defenseless and encourage the free-for-all. Then, we need to send more judges to the border to process these BS asylum claims on site and on the spot. 9 out of 10 don't qualify for asylum, so turn them around and send them right on back, because I guarantee you they'll stop trying to come here under false pretenses if they know they're going to get turned around the moment they fraudulently step foot on our soil. Next, reinstate Remain in Mexico, another great way to de-incentivize people with BS phony-ass asylum claims from making the journey. That'd also make Mexican officials rise to the occasion and step up to the plate. Guess what? Mexican citizens don't want their cities and streets burdened with migrants either, but right now they just send them right on through, so we have to deal with it. So cut off that luxury, and Mexico will play ball. Threaten tariffs like Trump did, and they'll play the flippin' World Series of ball, believe me. But the Democrats don't want to fix this because they designed it. They want to pump illegals into this country, give their corporate donors a massive low-wage workforce, use their beloved mail-in voting system to get illegals in on the action, and bolster census numbers and Democrat strongholds so as to add more Democrat seats to Congress. This is a very thinly veiled plan, and if we don't do everything we can to stop it now, there will be no going back. Because you can change policies, you can repeal legislation, but you cannot undo millions and millions of people living in the shadows, yet in plain sight. Our country is like the Titanic. Once the leaks fill the boat, it sinks, so start patching.
Glad you're with us as we kick off the final hour of this Wednesday edition. OutKick 360 continues with some news out of Gainesville. Jaden Rashada, excuse me. He has requested his release from his national letter of intent from Florida, that coming from On3. And this begins the saga of what they're going to do at quarterback. I know they've got some transfers, and this was the guy. And now he's wanting out, and it's over some NIL issues or some promises, and who knows where it actually ends up. But it's certainly a storyline to follow.
I mean, Graham Mertz is their option now at quarterback, their best option. That's not great.
No.
Things are not going well for Billy Napier so far at Florida. Not after this season, certainly not after this news. This is a big blow to the Gators. You land a 5-star quarterback, everything seems like it's okay with your program. And then that 5-star quarterback gets to campus, and then he leaves because reportedly he was maybe promised something that he's not getting. I've seen different things about a check being bounced to him from a collective at Florida. Word spreads quickly. This is an enormous story. Mm-hmm. It's only going to get bigger, and it's going to look terrible for the perception of Florida football with recruits.
Yeah, and he held a call earlier today with Scott Strickland. Now the NCAA will have to grant that release from the national letter of intent. He's already flipped, and it shocked a lot of people whenever he flipped from Miami to Florida. And now he's trying to get out, and for different reasons. Billy Napier.
Does he just go to Miami again and take whatever John Ruiz promised him?
But think about the I mean, he is about to be blitzed with all kinds of NIL now. Money. Trying to get him to show back up in the SEC teams. Just think about the quarterback play or the options just in the state of Florida alone. I mean, I guess he could go back to Miami, but if you're Miami, you've already tried to plan for your replacement of Rashada, right? Because he left.
I would love for one, maybe this is asking too much. I'd love for one coach of a program, and maybe it's Mario Cristobal, I don't know, to just say, you know what, GTFO to a guy that's a talent. Like, you're not going to decommit from here and go to one of our rivals in state and then come back and get more money from us and our collective. Like, leave. We're fine. We'll do better with guys that want to be here. This sounds rah-rah, and Dabo Swinney's definitely a rah-rah type guy. And he has been able to pull it off where he doesn't allow committed guys to visit other places once they commit. But I'd love for one coach to stand on principle or on something and just say, no, I don't care how talented you are and that you're a quarterback, a huge position, obviously. We're not going to let you come back. See ya. You chose Florida. The check bounced. Sorry. Go milk someone else for NIL money before you do anything. I'd love for one coach and one program to stand up and do that.
But the problem is literally every player now can be a 1 year and done out the door scenario. So it's hard to just use him as one example because your current quarterback could do that after this season. Wherever he ends up, he can leave. That's the other downfall of this.
He could stop playing midway through the season and immediately get in the transfer portal after the season and just decide I'm not doing anything here.
The NFL releasing the numbers for the national broadcasts, 185, all broadcasts combined, 185 plus million watched NFL games in 2022. 16.7 million was the average viewer per NFL game. And 88 NFL games have ranked among the top 100 shows on TV. That continues to rise. It was all but like 20. Now it's all but 12.
It is the live television. I mean, driver. I don't know. There's nothing close to it in America right now with live television in general, but sports are still the thing you watch live. It's it. I mean, even award show.
DVR proof.
Did anyone watch the Golden Globes last night? I didn't. I forgot that it was on.
No, we were watching basketball.
It's also on a Tuesday night, which it's normally on Sunday night. I mean, it's just.
Yeah. Why was that?
People don't care. I don't know the rationale behind it. I'm thinking about writing a piece for OutKick about what the Oscars should do.
Okay.
Based on Golden Globe winners and the direction they went to maybe, put some actual interest back in these very self-reverential award shows where they just, promote and celebrate themselves in Hollywood. I might write something about that.
I think the key or the missing ingredient is just Ricky Gervais. Just let him go out there and roast people.
Or let Chris Rock get slapped again by someone else.
Fair enough, yeah.
Who else wants to slap? Does The Rock have some vendetta against? He's never going to nominate
Stone
for an
Cold
Oscar.
comes out.
But someone come up, Stone Cold Stunner. Any type of violence on stage, the Oscars could help ratings for it. Let's get back to the goal of entertaining. Entertaining, inspiring. That is what movies. That's what cinema, Hutton, does at its best. It entertains. It inspires. Certainly, it's thought-provoking also, but that's what movies are supposed to do, television shows, everything else. If we get back more in line with that, and I may write more on it, then I think it will drive ratings for these different events also.
Carlos Correa reportedly was offered like $180 million over 5 years to stay in Houston at the time. He ends up signing a 6-year, $200 million deal with the Minnesota Twins. And, yeah, it's great. I mean, $200 million, right? And it's guaranteed. But
going back to the Twins.
Yeah, right. He's going back. They re-signed him after deals fell through with the Giants and the Mets. But he ends up making per year about $1.3 million, I believe was the number, 1 point and some change, more per annual year than what he would have if he had just re-signed with Houston. And my thing is, if you're Minnesota and you just had the physical, pending a physical, he would sign for these mega contracts, Giants and Mets. how do you bring him back with that uncertainty when the other teams that were willing to outbid you put him through the ringer and say, you know what? As a matter of fact, he's not going to work out for us because he's not passing this physical with us. Not one, but two.
I didn't expect – I know that's – I mean, look, it's a pay cut based on the contract he agreed to with the Mets. It's an insane amount of money. So I was expecting a huge cut because of the medicals, right? I was expecting less than that 6-year, $200 million figure.
Which probably just went back to their initial offer.
I understand bringing him back if you feel like, hey, we know more about this, and while there is some uncertainty, we think he's going to be fine and still be a really good player for us and be very productive and at a spot that we need him to be. I don't pay that much money, though. I'm all for bringing him back and signing him to a deal, even though doctors didn't pass him through the physical of other places. But I don't know that I'd bring him back for that much.
It's concerning to me if you're a Twins fan because you have Mets owner Steve Cohen, who was saying he was the final piece of their puzzle for, a payroll that is just insane. And even that organization said, you know what? He's not passing his physical. He's not going to be able to be that guy for us. After the owner said he was the final piece. And now he's back and you've got the Twins spending this. So you got to be thrilled, though. He's out of the division.
Yeah, and I just thought, it's just with all the guys in the Mets, I don't know that it really matters all that much. But, yeah, it's one more big bat in the lineup to worry about for the Mets. I just didn't expect him to get paid this much. I thought it'd be more cut for him.
So it was 13 years, $350 million with the Giants. Then Cohen came in with a 12-year, $315 million deal. Now it's 6 for $200. So it works out great for him.
He's still getting more per year.
Yeah,
to stay with the Vikings, the Twins.
Yeah.
Talking so much football, but it's still it's just less years. You're not getting with these guaranteed contracts. You're not getting that level of impact with security throughout.
Is there another team in the NL East that has bolstered themselves to compete with Philly, New York, and Atlanta?
No.
So it is a
Nationals are in full rebuild mode. The Marlins seemingly are
always
in constant rebuild mode.
Yeah.
Just two young teams sort of resetting. No, it's those three teams. And the Braves have not had nearly the commitment financially this offseason as the Mets and the Phillies. The Braves are more of just a let's run it back.
Yeah, with great talent they have under great contracts.
We came all the way back and won the division this last year and won it the year before. And they're on a bit of a roll where they feel like we got enough big-time talent locked up for a while in team-controlled contracts that we don't need to spend too much in the offseason.
When's the last time we've been? We need to go to a Braves game. I haven't been in years.
I've been to one in the new ballpark, total.
I think I've been in,
believe it or not,
2 or 3 maybe. We got to go. Take the show on the road.
We need to get down there for sure. I'm ready.
Ron Cook, one of the Hall of Fame voters for baseball, has not voted for anyone on the ballot for 3 years in a row. And I'm just not sure why you even waste your time as a Hall of Fame voter if you're not going to vote for anyone. I also hate the fact that you are allowed to just not vote for anyone on a ballot. You have to, in the whole point of having the election for the Hall is putting
I don't know
Hall of Famers in.
I don't know who's I'm only interested in Hall of Fame ballot stuff when we talk to Hall of Fame ballot people, because I feel like it's like the Skull and Crossbones Society at Yale. Like it's also secretive of like in the room of what you're doing. I need to know more about process and what happens, but then you're forbidden to talk about process at times. I don't know who's all on the ballot. So it's Barry Bonds, right, is one of the big things. So this is just some old baseball curmudgeon who says anyone who had any implication ever about anything scandalous, I'm not going to vote on them. And then they're saying that every other player, even if they didn't have a whiff of impropriety or steroids or anything else, they're not worthy of the Hall of Fame. So he's just made the Hall of Fame such a high standard, he's not going to vote on anyone.
Well, yeah, you're
He's
right.
saying no one's worthy. It's not that you don't have to vote. Like the NFL, the pro football, you vote a top 15 and a top 10
And you
a
pick
top
5.
five. Then you decide
Top 5 get
on
in.
the 5. They don't have to put anyone in.
But based on even his criteria, it's the guys who are from the steroid era are not worthy of the Hall. Well, that would bolster those who were not cheating to get in based on their numbers in competition against those who were. And you're still not voting for those dudes. It's just odd.
There's just no way around giving these voters way too much power. There's no way around. There's no other way to have a Hall of Fame unless you had just the god of each Hall of Fame that was one person that selected it. Then that's an even bigger problem. So there's going to be some committee of writers that are going to vote on it. Hall of Fames are important. There should be some that are no-brainers for it, but I just hate that the Hall of Fame voter is this cherished, honored thing, and yet they don't all treat it that way. So then I'm uncomfortable making them a big deal. Like this guy I don't know who Ron Cook is, don't care. I would love to take his name off the banner of our show right now because I don't want to give credit. Thank you very much. Great job. I don't want to give credit to Ron Cook. Let's talk about those players up under consideration for the Hall of Fame. I don't like it when the voter becomes the story.
Well,
we had this earlier this year with the dude that covers Notre Dame that out of spite because a Tennessee fan said something mean to him, kept voting Tennessee 12 spots lower than everyone else, right? And did that in the final thing too.
And the South Carolina guy.
You should not be allowed to do that. That's just, I hate even, I don't know the guy's name, don't want to, mentioning their name for that reason.
Well, so here are some of the candidates on the ballot for 2023, and he turned it in blank. Bobby Abreu, Bronson Arroyo, Carlos Beltran, R.A. Dickey, Jacoby Ellsbury. I'm running through a handful.
None of those guys immediately are Hall of Fame worthy to me.
Andrew Jones, Torrey Hunter, Jeff Kent, Andy Pettit, which he's not voting for, right? Scott Rowland, Jimmy Rollins, Gary Sheffield.
Gary Sheffield I'd put on that list.
Jason Worth, John Lackey, Manny Ramirez, and A-Rod.
I mean, someone should be on that list.
Yes.
On that one. Now, the first 8 you reeled off, I'd say, okay, I see his point. Then when you get into Sheffield and Todd Helton.
I start going through
and Manny
alphabetical.
Ramirez, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I should have jumped around.
Yeah. That's, whatever.
Coming up, Clay Travis.
Clay Travis will not give us a whatever stuff. He's better than Ron Cook.
We talked Georgia's dominance and DeMar Hamlin being released from the Buffalo hospital. He's headed home. And the college football national championship needs to be on a Saturday, right? I think you'll agree.
He better.
Clay's next on OutKick 360.
Man, just getting into the craziness. We've got the college football playoff championship game coming up on Monday. But looking back, your opinion, semifinal Saturday was just so wild, and getting to watch these games and coming down to the wire and the back and forth. Let's start off with Michigan TCU. You got Max Duggan and the way that he played, Jim Harbaugh and his squad. It just seemed like they kind of laxed out there in the middle, and TCU took advantage. And what were your takeaways of how TCU is now playing for a national championship?
I was pretty stunned that it happened and pretty stunned by the way it happened. So I guess going in, if you were to tell me an upset's going to happen, not the craziest thing in the world. I didn't expect it, but it's not a wild concept that a 9-point favorite or underdog can win a game. When you start to see it play out and you realize Michigan has these weapons that have gotten them to where they are, and they are electing not to use those weapons. Inside zone was a figment of your imagination in that game. It just didn't happen. Therefore, using J.J. McCarthy's legs really didn't happen. The way that you had seen it happen earlier in the season, using Donovan Edwards down inside the 5, where they got inside twice and scored 0 points from those trips, didn't happen. So I was sort of incredulous watching how it was unfolding. So here's what's funny. We were at the Peach Bowl, and that game's getting ready to happen, and I was on the field watching warm-ups, and I was standing there talking. Let me whisper. I was standing there talking with Urban Meyer, and he is watching the video board along with a lot of the other Ohio State staffers. And so it's kind of always a surreal environment. If you've ever been at that late playoff game, the early game's happening as your game's getting warmed up. And if you're in a stadium that has a big video board, like Mercedes-Benz has that ribbon board, it's on and the players can see it. And certainly the fans are reacting. So when TCU would score, Urban Meyer's just like going crazy, like a pure fanboy, just cheering like openly. And you're seeing some of the players on the field acknowledge it. And you're seeing some of the staffers on the sideline acknowledge it and like cheer. And all the while you're saying, hold on, we got a game that's going to kick off here in an hour. I'm not saying they weren't focused. I'm just saying it was a weird dynamic. But yeah,
Right.
Watching that unfold, and then just you knew what was immediately going to come after that. And that was Michigan lost. Okay, now we start up the Jim Harbaugh NFL rumor train, and that's going on even as we speak. So I was a little dumbfounded, to be honest with you. Not that they lost, but the manner in which they lost.
Is that going to transition? And I know we'll get into Georgia here in just a minute, but we've seen teams in the past where they get all up for one game and they put it all on the line. And then come that second game, and I'm not even just talking about playoffs. I could be talking about regular season as well. Can TCU do that again? Can they have that same type of energy? Can they play that same type of defense, and which was lacking in the third quarter? But I'm saying, can they get up for that type of game one more time?
I don't doubt they'll be up, but there are things that have to happen. You can call it disrespecting TCU if you want to. I fully respect the program, but we got to be real here. We're talking about a 12 or 13 point spread for a reason. There are things Georgia would have to do to assist them. Football happens that way sometimes. It just happened in the Michigan game. Michigan did some things to assist them. Credit TCU for grabbing the game and taking it. If Georgia doesn't do that, no, I don't think any amount of hype or being up will matter, because Georgia's a better team than you. They're that much better than you. If you can start to pull them out into the deeper end of making some mistakes, whether they be self-inflicted or whether you can steal a possession or two, onside kicks, fake punts, etc., all of which I think will have to be pulled out of the bag by TCU in this game.
Clay Travis joins us on OutKick 360 across the OutKick network each week at this time. Clay, hope things are well. And, man, what a beatdown and dominance by the Georgia Bulldogs. How are you?
I'm great. Probably not as good as Kirby Smart or Stetson Bennett or Georgia Bulldog fans around the nation, around the world. That was one of the most dominant championship sporting event games maybe that I've ever seen. I don't know that you can top that in terms of winning by 58 and just the utter obliteration that Georgia rained down in all facets of the game on TCU, such that a huge percentage of the overall population just decided, hey, I saw Withrow's tweet, I'm going to watch something else. Now, I didn't because I had the over in the game, and I wanted to make sure that it was going to hit.
Oh, it did easily.
You guys are gluttons for punishment to watch
fair
that.
Enough.
I did not want to sit through I don't think Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler wanted to sit through
ESPN didn't either.
It was a 90-minute coronation of all things Bulldog and Kirby Smart and Stetson Bennett. I'm like, yeah, I can there's plenty of streaming services I can go to right now. I'm not going to sit through this.
What was the best show, Withrow, that you heard that people were watching instead of the game?
A big one was Dan Dockich and Aaron Pirine responded to me, and they're watching this Bernie Madoff documentary, and it inspired me so much, Clay. I started watching it on Netflix. Pretty interesting. Bernie Madoff was an interesting guy.
I haven't watched that, but I watched. I finished White Lotus season 1 and season 2.
So good.
Yeah, it's really good. It's dark, a lot of great humor. It's not, my favorite show, I think, Withrow, you probably know better than I do. I think Succession comes back in like March. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I think it's a spring release. That's my most anticipated show of this year coming back. I'm with you. It's my favorite show.
Yeah, that's my favorite show on air right now in terms of still airing. But I'm caught up on Yellowstone. I watched White Lotus season 1 and season 2, and as soon as the NFL playoffs are over and the Super Bowl is over, we kind of hit a little bit of a lull. And so I've been hearing that Peaky Blinders is absolutely phenomenal. I've never watched it.
It's very good.
I'm thinking that might be
Clay.
I'm
glad you brought up Peaky Blinders, because Stephen Knight, who's the writer and showrunner for Peaky Blinders, there's another before you go to Peaky Blinders, even because this would be a lot quicker to finish. There's a show that's on Epix, and if you have cable, you can just download the Epix app and watch it. It was originally on the BBC, but it's Stephen Knight, creator of Peaky Blinders, and it's a show called Rogue Heroes. You're a history buff like me, and it's the true story of the SAS, the British SAS in World War II in North Africa, but it's told in a very dramatized, entertaining way with these crazy characters jumping out of planes and fighting Nazis. You'll love it. I'm 2 episodes in. It's great.
I would like to watch that. I've never watched, what is the World War II epic? I've read the books, Band of Brothers.
Band of Brothers,
I haven't ever watched that. I've heard it's incredible. Now, I've read those books because I was on a big World War II history kick in the past few years. So that's the other one that a lot of people are telling me that I should check out. So the history connection, obviously I'm a history nerd. So that has a lot of appeal to me.
I didn't know we'd go in this direction, but yeah, Band of Brothers, the Pacific is the other side of that. And that's on HBO. And coming this summer, Austin Butler, who just won the Golden Globe last night for Best Actor, playing Elvis Presley in the movie Elvis. Yeah. He is starring in Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg's next iteration of this World War II drama. And I think it's I'm blanking on the name of it, but it's the Air Force side of it. So it was Army
that's cool.
and Band of Brothers, Marines in the Pacific, and this is an Air Force story where he's a pilot. And it's a miniseries, basically, about World War II.
On this.
And it's the American Air Force.
Planes and Top Gun. And then what's
really
the other
good.
one?
We got a lot of suggestions coming out.
The other Top Gun-like movie that's coming out? We talked about it yesterday.
Devotion is the name of it. You can watch it right now, I think, on Paramount Plus. It's out.
Clay, where does the story of Stetson Bennett rank for you among classic college football headlines?
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of what his dream was to grow up and play football for Georgia. And so for a lot of college football fans, you dream more about growing up and playing for your favorite college football team than you do growing up and actually going to the NFL. And so to me, it's the culmination of what so many people out there, spent so much time in their youth, playing in the backyard, playing, little peewee football, whatever you want to call it. It's as compelling of a story. And I think if you combine it with Kirby Smart, and maybe somebody can come up with a combo like this, but to have a Georgia grad in Kirby Smart win 2 national championships for his school with a quarterback in Stetson Bennett who grew up a fan of the school that he was playing for, walked on. I don't know that that's ever been done before. And for people out there, I mean, I'd be curious if somebody can think of another example. Certainly it hasn't happened in the modern era where, you grow up a fan of a team, you go there, win 2 national championships, and play for a coach who also wins national championships, who previously was a player at that school. That's unheard of. And so I think it's kind of the Hollywood storybook ending in a way that may not have ever existed in sports before. I think I'm correct that Kirby Smart is the first graduate of the school that he has won multiple national championships at since Bear Bryant. So that's a pretty incredible story standing alone, because there aren't even that many alums who end up the head coach of their schools, to say nothing of win multiple national titles there.
Masters of the Air is the name of the series.
Oh,
I was
there we
thinking
go.
about the Air Force, and it's not on HBO. It's purchased by Apple TV, so it'll be on Apple this summer. So, Clay, I'm curious about your thoughts on this. Speaking of Alabama, Nick Saban is on the ESPN coverage of this game for hours. He's good on TV. I understand the appeal to bring on Nick Saban when you can. But what do you think about Nick Saban being allowed as Alabama's head coach to basically have a 6-hour infomercial of Alabama football on everyone's televisions on the biggest night of TV viewing in college football for the year?
I mean, I don't begrudge him for taking the opportunity.
Of course not. No, I don't begrudge him at all.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think they wouldn't do it at ESPN unless they thought he was really good, right? They're not giving him a gift. They believe he's really good at television. I've talked with Kirk Herbstreit. I think Kirk Herbstreit has said this publicly. And he thinks of all the coaches that they have on, Saban is the guy who translates most naturally to television if he ever decided to do it. Now, you know, how old is Saban now? 70, I think. So the older he gets, I think maybe the more challenging that becomes to do for a long time. But Urban is really good at television. I think way better than anybody expected to be at television. You know, in terms of like the pre and post game scenarios, Jimmy Johnson obviously has been incredible at it for some period of time now. I think Sean McVay, if he eventually does it, could be John Madden-like in his ability. But I think it's, you know, a value add for sure to ESPN's coverage. And, you know, I think Saban's better. I mean, who else would you put in there? I mean, Fox has got Urban, so Urban's off the table. Dabo, I just don't think is that great on television, and I don't think he has that much interest in it. Otherwise, like, who else is out there that's good enough?
Well, it's not like
in terms of playing in championships.
I have a split mind on this, Clay, because I'm looking at it from the programmer standpoint. ESPN would be dumb not to ask Nick Saban to be on there. He's great on television. He's famous. He's a name everyone knows. But my split mind is saying ESPN also has big-time relationships with other conferences, not as much as the SEC, but, hey, there's 14 teams in the SEC. And there's a lot at stake with all of that. And I'm just having a big problem if I'm any of the other teams that want to get my message out there too and want to have a shot on television, if it's only Nick Saban that dominates the set over a long pregame show, halftime, everything else. So it's just the difficult dance of being in bed financially with conferences and leagues and everything else. And then how you do that in a sport where, you know, it's not the NFL. There's not a draft. You know, there's not free agency. Like, it's recruiting. So the more you're on television, the bigger thing you have, it's a bigger advantage.
There's only 3 coaches that have ever won multiple national championships that are still in any way connected to college football, right? Urban is X'd out because he's at Fox. This is before Kirby won his second. Dabo probably said no. I would bet they offered Dabo the opportunity to be on. He's probably like, I don't want to do 6 hours of, you know, pregame. So then you got Saban. It's just a short roster of guys that have even coached in a national championship game. So when you're having somebody on to talk national championships, I would want him. I thought you were going to ask me the moment that went viral for Nick Saban. And first of all, not that many people actually watch the pre and post game shows, right? Like, you know, let's say 17.7 million, I think, is the number that watched the game itself.
Well, Clay, I'll tell you this: more people watch the pregame, the final 30 minutes of pregame, looking at the ratings, than the final 30 minutes of the game. They were at 16 million there, and it went down to 8 million by the end of the game because it was such a blowout.
I mean, I'm on a pregame show, so I want the pregame show viewership to be as high as possible. most people turn on the game when it starts. Obviously that can filter off if the game's not very competitive and if the gambling odds are not in the mix. But to me, the most viral moment by far was actually David Pollock saying, "Hey, Georgia dominates," while sitting right next to Nick Saban. And I don't buy into the idea. Nick Saban's had like the number one recruiting class in the nation for basically 15 years in a row. I don't think that it actually is going to change anybody's mind that he's on the pregame show in terms of going to Alabama. You're going to go to Alabama if you can, pretty much. Like Mike Leach used to always tell me, like there's two programs. There's the ones that recruit and there's the ones that invite. And Alabama is an invite program. I mean, look, I don't think you can begrudge your kid's choice to go to Alabama based on that long legacy and history of putting people in the first round of the NFL draft, which ultimately is the reason why people are picking Alabama in addition to the winning.
Here's, though, where I think that Georgia and Kirby Smart have a huge advantage. And I've read pieces on this also. From a geographic standpoint, it may be the best job in America, just within a 50-mile radius of players, even better than Alabama. And Kirby Smart has the added bonus. Now, Nick Saban's not going anywhere. He's not going to leave Alabama. But Kirby Smart has the added bonus of being an alum, as you mentioned, Clay. He's got Will Muschamp as an alum, as his defensive coordinator, who I don't think is headed anywhere anytime soon. He's got a 62-year-old offensive coordinator. I know Dan Lanning left last year for Oregon. That's not a staff that's getting regularly rated like Alabama's. They have a continuity and consistency with that program, and a football throws reach to some of the best players in America every single year that I look at them and think, this is not ending. And Clay, when you look at that schedule next year, that is the weakest SEC schedule and non-conference schedule I've seen.
The layup.
They are a 17-plus point favorite, possibly in every game, maybe outside of in Knoxville in November when they play that game on the road. This thing is set up to be quite the dynasty. I think they've got – I'm going to go ahead and say it. I'm predicting them right now. They're going to win a third straight national championship next year.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say, a couple of things. One, they had Oklahoma on that schedule, and the SEC made them take it off. So because Oklahoma and Texas are coming into the conference. So when people look at the out-of-conference, they have their SEC schedule, and then they have Georgia Tech every year, which is traditionally a rivalry game, and then they had Oklahoma. So they had 10 FBS Power 5 teams on that schedule, and they made them take Oklahoma off. Second part of this, I several years ago played a charity golf event. Kirby Smart and I were in the same cart together for 5 or 6 hours. So I spent a lot of time talking with him. I like him. He's a very likable guy. I've got to meet his wife a bunch of times. I think she's awesome. She's a former athlete at Georgia as well. I think that factors in. They're raising their kids in Athens. It's a really good family. So it doesn't surprise me that he recruits well, and that there are a lot of people out there who have kids, because the first thing you think about is, you're sending your boy, your 17 or 18-year-old kid away, and you want there to be a family environment. And I think Kirby comes off very well, in the same way Nick Saban does, in those in-home meetings. And I think Athens is obviously a fabulous place to have a kid, because, you may look around and say, well, it's not a city, so you may feel safer with your kid in Athens, but you're not far away from Atlanta, so you can get in and out of Atlanta quite easily, okay? I would say Georgia basketball has the same advantages as Georgia football, and they've never been able to, sort of unlock that key. So I think Kirby Smart deserves a lot of credit. What I would say is 47-year-old Kirby Smart, I think it's way easier to get burned out coaching college football now than it is coaching the NFL. And I wonder, on some level, just based on the 5 or 6 hours that I spent with him in a golf cart, I was talking with a buddy of mine recently, the amount of incessant recruiting that you have to do, which is added to even more in an NIL era, is off the charts, even for somebody like Kirby Smart. And you spend huge parts of your day texting 16-year-old boys to try to convince them to come to your school. I had a funny conversation with a buddy who's a coach. I was out to dinner recently, and I said, like, how many teenage boys' phone numbers do you have right now in your phone? And he was like, 100. And I was just laughing about it. There's no other profession in America where you could be a grown man and have 100 teenage boys' phone numbers and be texting them all the time, where you wouldn't be like, yeah, that dude's got something shady going on.
You up?
And so if you think about having to text 16-year-old boys, LOL, memes, like all the ridiculous stuff that you have to do to recruit them, I actually think the NFL, because they have a set calendar, is actually way better of a job. And so I understand the argument of, you know, he's coaching at his alma mater. He's 47 years old. I think he could burn out, because I think it's way harder and way more all-encompassing when you consider NIL now getting rolled in. You're constantly recruiting. The transfer portal is always open. You've got guys who decide to go into the transfer portal because they're not getting the money that they want. I mean, look at what's going on with Florida right now with, was it Jaden Rashada?
Yep.
I think I've got his name right there. He initially committed to Miami, didn't like that NIL, goes to Florida, now is decommitting from Florida, but evidently, according to the most recent updates, because of NIL-related concerns. You can never rest. And then you add on that to every time the phone rings at 2 a.m. and one of your kids on your team is getting in trouble for something, you get blamed for it in a way that doesn't happen in the NFL. And, you know, you don't have to recruit anybody in the NFL. You got to break down tape. You got to figure out, you know, who to draft. But there's a very set calendar, and you can have a life, I think, in the NFL in a way that you can't in college. And so nobody's really talking about this, but I think the NIL, the transfer portal, all of those aspects of college, it used to be like the reason why Nick Saban left the Miami Dolphins and went back to Alabama was because he wanted to have complete control of his program. And in the NFL, you have to worry because a player might have a $30 or $40 million contract, and they might not listen to you like a college kid would. Well, now all of a sudden, the management aspect of being a college coach is maybe as intense, maybe even more intense than the NFL. And so I think there's going to be a lot of burnouts happening in college football in a way that we haven't gotten used to in the past. And I would just put that on the radar as one of the consequences of zero restriction, basically transferring and NIL every year. You know, you used to be able on signing day in February to take a big breath and think, okay, the team is in, we got all those signatures, we can work going forward, but let's take a little bit of a breather now. I don't know that there's an off season in college football now. There definitely is one in the NFL. I would just put that on the horizon as something that has to be paid attention to.
Clay, Kentucky loses last night as an 18.5-point favorite to a team that now is ranked 224th in the net ranking. That's after beating Kentucky on the road. You and I have a close mutual friend who's a Kentucky grad. We know as well as anyone that there's no meltdown quite like a Kentucky fan meltdown during basketball season when this happens. What is that experience like when you get online and you start to look at a meltdown like this from Kentucky basketball, which quite frankly is kind of unexplainable this year because they've got Oscar Tshiebwe, they've got Severe Will, they've got veteran guys on this team. This is not a completely new young team, yet here's Kentucky 1-3 in the SEC.
Yeah, look, I mean, I thought the most fascinating part about that game, and I put it on with, 6 or 7 minutes last night remaining in the game to watch when I saw what the score was. And by the way, I don't know how many people do that. Like, you go into your score app and say, okay, is this game competitive? And if it is, you might put it on in a way I wasn't planning on watching.
All the time I do that.
Yeah,
all the time.
Especially for basketball.
I thought Kentucky would beat South Carolina pretty comfortably. I looked down and saw South Carolina was up 4 or 5 with 6 minutes to go, and I put it on. I thought the sign, please go to Texas. They kicked somebody out in Rupp Arena for having the please go to Texas sign. And what is interesting is I would analogize the way that Kentucky is committed to John Calipari right now is, to me, somewhat similar to the way the Denver Broncos are committed to Russell Wilson and the Cleveland Browns are committed to Deshaun Watson, by which I mean you're basically married to them. And so Kentucky has given so much guaranteed money to John Calipari that they basically can't afford to fire him. In a similar way, the Broncos and the Browns cannot afford to move on from either Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson. So you've got a form of golden handcuffs here. And what seems to be the case is Kentucky fans are clearly hoping at this point that John Calipari will leave and go to Texas. My question is, and obviously because Texas basketball has fired Chris Beard over a domestic violence allegation. My question is, does Texas want John Calipari? And if they do, what does that do to Kentucky basketball? Because you'll remember when Calipari went from Memphis to Kentucky, he took John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins and all those high-end recruits that were otherwise going to go to Memphis. Well, John Calipari, the best thing you can say for him right now is he has an incredibly elite class that he's put together for next year. So would he leave? Would those recruits follow him? If he doesn't, can he get the ship righted, so to speak, in Kentucky? It's turned pretty nasty for him. And it actually reminds me a little bit of the way the Tubby Smith era went down the stretch before Kentucky moved on from Tubby. If you remember, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I think Tubby Smith just decided to go to Minnesota and took another job. And that was their kind of exit ramp for Tubby. They didn't fire him. I don't know that happens with John Calipari, but I wonder how many, fungible and or somewhat comparable big jobs would even take John Calipari right now. I think Kentucky's in a tough spot.
Clay, final minute and a half here. Give me your Super Bowl matchup and why, based on the way some of these teams are going into the playoffs and the way that others are limping in.
Before the season, my Super Bowl matchup was the Bills against the Cowboys. I'll stick with the Bills in the AFC. I don't think that the Cowboys are going to come out of the NFC. I think the best team is the 49ers. I'm not sure how Brock Purdy is going to hold up as the quarterback for the 49ers. But in terms of the overall talent everywhere but quarterback, I like the 49ers. So if I were given a mulligan in the NFC, I think I would take the 49ers now as my favorite to advance from the NFC. And I would stick with the Bills, even though they're now the 2 seed. And we still have to determine, I don't think it's been announced yet, where a Chiefs-Bills game would be played. I think we'll get a rematch of that divisional game that was so epic last year between those two. And a crazy stat that I don't think gets talked about enough is that would be the first playoff game in Patrick Mahomes' career that he didn't play at home, which is pretty remarkable given his career so far. He's never played, other than the Super Bowl, obviously, which is always neutral. He's never played an AFC playoff game anywhere other than Arrowhead Stadium.
Still crazy, too, that Tyreek Hill's traded away and Patrick Mahomes passes for 5,000 yards, joining Drew Brees and Peyton Manning as the only 3 quarterbacks to do it twice in a career. And he did it without Tyreek Hill, which is just phenomenal. He's the MVP.
Yeah, he's incredible. And so I think we'll get a Bills-Chiefs AFC championship game, and I would pick the Bills to find a way through that. And then, obviously the Bengals are playing really well too. I think whoever wins the AFC is going to win the Super Bowl. But I would take the Bills as my AFC participant.
Clay, enjoy it, man. The slopes or Key West or wherever you are right now, whatever exotic locale. Hope you're having fun.
I'm back home in Nashville for a little while now. So back home. Yeah.
Welcome home.
Good luck on the next trip.
It's been a while.
Wherever it is.
See you, Clay.
See you, Clay. Thanks for joining us, man.
Clay Travis joins us each week at this time.
He'll be in
Wednesdays.
Thailand in 2 weeks.
Yeah, he's headed to the villa in Italy next.
Yes.
Coming up, put a wrap on the show, look ahead to the sports evening, and hit some headlines as some other injury reports are beginning to pop up.
Also a report that Jaden Rashada, directly from his father, has not filed to get out of Florida's national letter of intent, which is going against the report from On3. This from the director of recruiting for 24/7 Sports.
Okay.
Interesting tie-in.
We'll look the details up on this during the break and come back with that on OutKick 360.
Back to the Christian thing in the broad picture. Your father, how many kids, if you don't mind saying, do you have several kids? One kid?
Seven children.
You have 7 children, so you're a big family, man. I did not know that.
Yes.
How many sons? Because this is what I kind of want to dig into.
I have 5 sons.
5 sons, perfect. As a Christian man, how do you feel, like, what is your job when it comes to raising young men in modern America?
Number one, to teach my boys to know and love Jesus. That would be their primary identity in life. To everything else being completely secondary to that. That is number one. Number two would be to make them capable men, right? To make them well-rounded, to make them, able to handle themselves, to make them strong physically, able to fight, able to shoot, able to protect their future, their own families. A great quote, Robert Heinlein, and I'm going to butcher it, but I will attempt it anyways. He basically says that a man should be able to plan an invasion, change a diaper, cook a meal, build a house, he just goes down this list of you should be able to do all these things as a man. And then at the very end, he says specialization is for insects. And I did not always think that. All right. I mean, there was times in my life where I didn't care about learning how to weld or be mechanically inclined or any of these other things. I was like, oh, I just want to be a commando. I just want to go and shoot and do hard stuff. And that was a mistake. I mean, I think I've said this before on, I did 2 ship deployments, 2 ARG deployments as a young frogman. And honestly, I was arrogant at the time. And man, here you're on a ship, which was kind of miserable. And I had a bad attitude about it instead of, because I'm like, I should be on land training more. And instead of going, okay, this is where I'm at. Yeah, I don't have to like it, but there's all these master machinists and welders and guys that are, in charge of charts and navigation, to navigate across the globe. And here I could have, if I would have showed just a little bit of interest, those guys would have been happy to be like, oh yeah, I'll teach you how to weld. I'll teach you how to run a lathe, all these things that now I'm like, man, I want to learn all that stuff. I want to be able to do everything. And some of that's reinforced now. Kind of, we live out on a little bit of a farm, so you do need to be able to, when stuff breaks, you need to be able to fix it yourself, and so there's a lot of value in that. So I want, number one, I want my boys to know and love Jesus, and then number two, to be capable. It's actually, so we do a program called Father-Son Ministry, where it's gone through different iterations. Currently, the way we run it is you show up, we pray, we say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we start training. And that was very deliberate right there, that, hey, we honor God first, then we honor our nation, and then we start to train. Most of the time we do jiu-jitsu. So that's been just super cool, having the boys go from it just looking clownish, them rolling around, to, man, they're, some of those boys, I will actually, break a sweat rolling with them now, and they will absolutely catch some guys with triangles and arm bar. They're actually learning jiu-jitsu.
Wrapping up what's been a fun show, OutKick 360 across the OutKick network. Chad, it's not been fun in Lexington. We've been discussing that throughout the show, and fans and Kentucky Sports Radio, and, well, they're displeased. They're pissed off.
Displeased that this was a call into Kentucky Sports Radio last night after the loss to South Carolina.
TJ, what's up?
Hey, Matt. I've been a fan for over 30 years, and obviously outside of the important things in life, God, family, country, Kentucky basketball is all I got. And I'm not the only one who feels that way. And in the past couple of years, our native Kentuckians have gone through hell and back with tornadoes and floods and deaths and COVID, and now we have to go through this.
Hey,
losing to South Carolina,
tornadoes, death, tornadoes, floods, death, COVID, Kentucky hoops losing to South Carolina at Rupp Arena, all equal in the eyes of that caller.
I've long said, Chad, the best calls are the great callers or the awful callers, not the middle ground.
Can't be in between either. You've got a really good thought and a really good question.
That was perfect.
Or it's a really bad caller. There's no in between when it comes to callers being good or bad. Hey, quick update. Brandon Huffman, who's the director of recruiting for 24/7 Sports, is reporting now, tweeting, per Harlan Rashada, who is the father of Jaden Rashada, to 24/7 Sports, quote, Jaden has not filed a request for a release from Florida. That's the latest on the Jaden Rashada story.
So Strickland had the phone call. Did they make things right on the money? Like that? Based on that versus on 3?
Could be semantics, too. Maybe you don't have to ask for the release. Maybe they're just releasing them.
Yeah, fair enough. We're back at it tomorrow. Maybe we'll have some clarity there. And we'll talk college and NFL here on OutKick 360.